Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into something pretty interesting. It's a single, very focused piece of analysis on the struggles we're all seeing with Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs offense.
Right.
And it's a piece that really tries to cut through all the stats and the noise to offer what it calls an uncomfortable, heavy truth about, the face of the NFL.
And that's what makes it so compelling. I mean, you look at the standings. The Chiefs are still winning some games, but anyone who actually watches them play can see it. The offense looks, I don't know, disjointed.
Yeah.
It's often just not fun to watch. And our source today, it isn't really looking to just place blame. It's making a much more nuanced argument.
Which is?
That Mahomes is facing, and this is a quote, the biggest shadow of his entire career.
Mm.
And not because his talent is fading, but because he's basically being crushed by the environment around him.
Okay, that's a big claim. The writer sort of starts out by agreeing with the critics, saying Mahomes is, quote, no longer the player he once was. That he seems more emotionally burdened, you see the frustration. But then comes this crucial pivot, the defense that this whole argument is built on. The source insists this change is almost none of his fault.
And that really sets up our whole deep dives today. It acknowledges what we all see with our own eyes, the irritation, the miscommunications, but then it completely shifts the responsibility.
Right. Off the quarterback's shoulders and puts it squarely on the structural elements, the team, the coaching, all of it.
Exactly. So our job is to examine the evidence they present for why the system is failing its star instead of the other way around.
So if we go with that, then the central idea is that Mahomes has lost his famous lightness, his instinct, because he's carrying a structure that just doesn't work anymore.
It's an indictment of the machine, not the engine.
Okay, let's start there. Let's unpack how this source describes, I guess, the theft of that instinct.
To really get the weight he's carrying now, the source asks you to rewind. Just think back a few years to the early Mahomes era. He wasn't just good, he was a phenomenon.
A force of nature.
Yeah. He's described here as a kid with a cannon for an arm who played with absolutely no fear, no pressure, none of the impossible expectations he has on him now.
He really did feel like a bolt of lightning. The source uses these big metaphors like a comet and says he destroyed everything the NFL thought it knew about playing quarterback.
He basically reinvented the game overnight. It wasn't just that they were winning, it was how they were winning that was so captivating.
And that how is the entire key to this argument, isn't it?
It is. What defined him back then was his style. The source calls it a chaotic and brilliant style that made him an artist. That freedom wasn't just something he did now and then. It was the foundation of his whole game.
The no-look passes, the cross-body throws.
All of it. Those weren't just risky plays. That was his default mode.
That's a really important distinction, default mode. It suggests the Chiefs' whole offense was built to let him create, to operate outside the playbook when he needed to.
Precisely. They were the ultimate improv act. But the core point from the source today is that this improvisational artist, this free player, well, he doesn't appear as often anymore.
No, we're seeing a quarterback who looks like he's trying to stick to a script, and he looks uncomfortable doing it.
And this is where the source makes its strongest point about his identity. The argument is that Mahomes was molded to be free, but now he's being forced to be a robotic executor of predictable plays.
And that, they say, is what's breaking their game more than any stat could ever show.
It's the difference between being a jazz musician and just playing the notes on the page. The talent's still there, but that creative spark, that connection is just, it's gone.
Which leads us right into the emotional cost. I mean, when you're the face of the NFL, the pressure has to be just astronomical.
This is where it gets really insightful. Because the source suggests all this external pressure is forcing him into, like, a destructive mindset.
The burden of perfection.
The burden of sustaining impossible perfection. The source says Mahomes now carries the weight of the world on his shoulders. I mean, just think about that.
Yeah.
Every single snap, millions of people are just waiting for a mistake.
And the consequence of that, according to this analysis, is that he's now playing to avoid mistakes.
Yes.
He's not playing to win anymore. He's playing not to fail. And that's the complete opposite of the player who got famous by taking huge risks.
Playing not to lose is just toxic for a talent like him. His whole genius came from the confidence to take a chance, The idea that the reward was worth the occasional interception. But now, trying to be safe is what the source says is destroying his naturalness, which of course starts to mess with his emotional state.
Let's dig into that a little more, the psychological impact. The source is very direct, saying his emotional state is visibly shaken.
Yeah, and we've all seen it. The source details the symptoms. He gets irritated more easily. He complains more. You can see the
He's
frustration.
arguing with receivers, looking over at the sideline.
Exactly. Looking to the sideline, waiting for answers, and they don't come. That image is just, it's haunting. The genius looking for help and getting nothing back.
It's like a loss of that self-reliance that used to be his superpower. The famous poise, the calmness, it's just not there as much.
No. Instead, you get this picture of a player who looks tense, carrying pressure that should be spread across the whole team, not just on one guy's shoulders.
Which brings us to the machine itself. If the player is this burden, we have to look at the root cause.
Yeah.
And this is where the source drops its shocking truth.
This is the core of it. Quote, he's carrying a team that's no longer at his level.
Wow.
That's the central thesis. Mahomes is being held to this standard of greatness, but he's working with a supporting cast and a playbooks that are just average. The gap between his talent and what's around him is now just too wide.
Okay, let's break that down. What are the specific problems with the offense? It's described pretty brutally as predictable, limited, tired, and slow.
And the source gets into the why. First, the wide receivers are not providing enough separation. If you actually watch the games, the reads are slow to open up.
Because the routes are repetitive.
Repetitive, easily diagnosed. So Mahomes is either forcing it into tight windows or he's getting sacked because no one's getting open in time.
And that loss of explosiveness, that creativity, it means they can't rely on the big play anymore. They have to grind out these long drives, which is just a riskier way to play football.
It forces Mahomes to be a hero on every single down. If the play design only gets you 4 yards, he has to scramble for 6 more. He's constantly trying to elevate a system that isn't helping him. And that is exhausting.
Which, of course, raises the big question the source has to confront. What about Andy Reid, the offensive mastermind, if the plays are predictable?
The coaching has to be questioned. And this is where the source really goes for it. They argue that Reid needs to be questioned, not because he's a bad coach, but because he seems stuck in conservative choices.
But hold on, couldn't you argue that those conservative choices are just a logical reaction to the receivers he has? If they can't get open deep, of course you'd call shorter routes.
That's a fair point, and the source sort of addresses it by focusing on stagnation, not just adaptation. The argument is that Reid's calls no longer surprise, plays seem recycled.
Right.
And his crucial decisions, like in the red zone, are increasingly questionable. This suggests it's more of a failure of imagination, not just him adjusting to his personnel.
So the end result is that Mahomes feels, quote, completely alone out there. He knows the playbook isn't going to save him.
He has to save himself every single time. It's an impossible situation.
So if we bring all of this together, the insane expectations, the struggling teammates, the conservative coaching, we can finally see how it all plays out on the field.
Right. The system failure creates the desperate symptoms we see. The forced passes, the hasty readings. He starts pressing, trying to save the game myself.
And that's when the improvisations that used to be magic start to fail because nobody else is on the same page.
That's the core technical breakdown. He's lost his connection with the offense. They aren't in sync anymore. What used to be controlled chaos is now just chaos.
And this all leads to the final, really powerful conclusion from the source, which is a direct challenge to anyone saying Mahomes is in decline.
They argue he is not declining. He hasn't lost his arm, his talent, his genius. The real shock is that he needs to do 10 times more to achieve the same result.
That reframes the entire conversation. The problem isn't a drop in his ability, it's a huge inflation in the effort it takes just to stay afloat because the structure around him is crumbling.
Precisely. The ultimate takeaway is that he lost the perfect environment to shine. The analysis concludes that he's seen by outsiders as part of the problem, when he's actually the force that still prevents total disaster. She's paying the price for everyone else's mistakes.
That is a really profound way to look at it. So, to summarize this whole analysis, the criticism of Patrick Mahomes is, for the most part, misplaced. The real issue, this source argues, is a predictable offense, conservative coaching, and a weak supporting cast, all forcing him to abandon his natural style.
It's a really strong defense, and it shifts the focus from, just blaming one guy to looking at the whole system. And that raises a really important question for everyone listening.
Go on.
If the biggest thing holding back sustained greatness is the environment, the support, the philosophy, the talent around you, what specific proactive role does an organization have to make sure that environment stays perfect for a generational talent they already have?
That's the question we're left with. It's not just about arm strength, it's about the psychology of peak performance. Can even the greatest talent overcome an organization that's maybe gotten a little too comfortable? Thank you for joining us on the deep dive.